Hey hackers, Blue Cosmo from CCS here, and welcome to Module 3 of the Introduction to Python course, that Cosmodium is providing. If you guys are watching this on YouTube, again, you guys can head over to our website where you guys can take the course over there. It might be a little bit easier, plus there's things like quizzes and easy access to the course overview. You can also get a certificate upon your completion for like $15. So it's pretty cool. You can check it over there. Links in the description. But regardless, we're gonna head straight into the course because again, no one likes long introductions, right? So let's head over to my screen. So today we're covering loops, and loops are basically something that runs a set of code multiple times. All right, and I'm gonna be using the term iteration a lot. And an iteration is just each time a loop runs, right? So the first type of loop I'm gonna get into is while loops, right? So first let's save this file, right? And let's go to make a new folder. We'll call this folder module 3. Let's head into here and we'll call this while loop.py. All right, now a while loop evaluates code as long as a condition is true. If it is false, so if the condition is false, the loop will end. When the loop ends, we use the term break to say that it ends. The loop broke, right? Or break the loop. And this will make more sense later. So, by the way, if I'm moving too fast for you guys for whatever reason, remember in the link is the course overview. So everything I'm talking about, everything I'm typing is on the GitHub page for this course. You just click on module 3 and the README will have everything I'm talking about right now. So I can show you. So if I'm moving too fast, while this talks about everything we're talking about today, all right? It's linked in the description. It's linked in the course overview button if you're taking the course on my website. So if I'm moving too fast, you can just use the course overview as a reference, all right? I is usually the variable used when we work with loops, and I stands for index. We'll get into that in the next module, but just I is just the default variable we'll typically use. But it's better to make your variable name more related to your code. But when you're doing like tutorials and stuff, I is typically the standard. So I is equal to 0. All right, so while, this is our while loop, our I is less than or equal to 5. So you can see here, this is basically the same. It's similar to our if statement, right? If I is less than or equal to 5. It's pretty much the same thing, right? So instead of if, we're doing while. So while I is less than or equal to 5, and I'll specify that this is our while loop. We'll say I class equals 1, and then we'll print I, and then we'll print loop has ended. So if we run this code, it's going to, oh no, let me make that full screen. All right, so we have a variable equal to 0. So as long as, remember, evaluates code as long as the condition is true. So instead of saying while, just say as long as, because it'll help you understand it. So as long as our I variable is less than or equal to 5, we'll add 1 to the variable, and then we'll print it. Then it'll go back up here, and it'll say, all right, well, is 1 less than or equal to 5? Yes. All right, then we'll add 1, so it's now 2, and then we'll print it out. And then it'll just keep doing this over and over again until this condition is no longer true. Because once the condition is false, the loop will break. And once it broke, we printed this. So this is a while loop. It's very straightforward, it's very simple. While loops can be infinite, all right? So you can do something like while true, print, I don't know, high. So if we do this, it's just going to infinitely print high on our screen. Now to stop it, you can hit Control-C to do a keyboard interruption. But yeah, you can make, an infinite loop with while. I don't know why you would need to make an infinite loop. But there you go, it's there. So to end a loop from running, we can use the break statement, right? So we can say if I is equal to 3, print ending loop, and then we can break the loop, because again, break will end the loop. So ends. So now, instead of going to the number like 6, this will only go up to the number 3, because it will do our current operation. They'll say if I is equal to 3, then it will print ending loop, and then it will break. Anything put after the break statement will not run unless if it's in a different scope, right? So if we put break up here, this if statement will not run. Right? It will break it. This won't be ran. But because this break is in a different scope, it won't have to worry about you won't have to worry about it breaking on the other part of the code, right? So the break statement ends a loop. So you can't use the break statement out here. Like you can't put break out here, and yeah, break is outside of a loop, right? Again, I'll put my volume down so that way you don't have to hear that annoying Windows noise. So yeah, that's how you can end the loop. All right. Now the continue statement, so we'll say, let's make this 10. All right. So if the number is 8, it will end the loop. All right. And so let's say if we want to do something to the loop once it reaches a certain value, and then like, what if we want to skip the current iteration of the loop, right? Remember, an iteration is just each time the loop runs. So each iteration of a loop is each time it's running. Let's say if we want to do something where we want to cancel the loop from running if it reaches a certain iteration and then skip to the next one, right? So in order to do this, we can use the continue statement, which will cancel the current iteration and move on to the next one, right? So let's say if I is equal to 5, and we can say print, we'll say halfway there, and then continue. So what if we put this print statement down here, right? So it only will print I if none of these conditions were true, right? So let's run this. Oh, whoops. There you go. So we run this. So instead of printing 5 when it reaches number 5, it prints halfway there, and then we'll continue. If we got rid of this and ran it, it would print halfway there, and then it would print 5. but because we have this continue here, it will skip iteration. Skips current iteration. So because of that, it doesn't print 5, but instead we'll skip the loop and move on. We'll save this and then Control-Shift-S. We'll make a new file called range.py, and we'll delete all this. All right, so range is a function that creates a sequence of numbers. Now, the function has, like all functions, they have arguments, right? Make a docstring, and in here we'll say first argument is the start, leave blank for 0. All right, so this, you'll understand the arguments in a second. I'm just writing these out so that way you guys have an idea of how it works. So the third argument is the interval. And you can leave this blank as well. You can leave it blank for no interval. All right, so I'm gonna catch you guys up on what this is, right? So the range is a function. Remember, a function is something that takes an input, does an operation on it, and returns it, right? Whether it's output or not is up to the function, right? So we have a range function that will take in an argument. We have this range function that will create a sequence of numbers, right? So let's make our list of nums. And we're going to have this list function. I'm going to explain what this list function does in a second. But we're going to have this range function in here. And this range function will take in our first argument. Let's say it's 1. So that's where the sequence is going to start. And our second argument will say 10. And this is where our sequence will end, right? You can actually leave this first argument blank if you wanted to start from 0. So we'll just leave it blank so we can start it from 0. And we're not going to do a third argument yet. We'll show that in a second. So then we can print our num list. And if we run this, it creates this sequence of numbers, this list of numbers from 0 to 10. We're like, well, if you put it from 0 to 10, how come it stops at 9? Well, there's still 10 numbers here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There's 10 numbers in here. It's just not 1 through 10, right? So let's say, all right, well, let's put 1 through 10 here, right? And we'll save this. And by the way, you separate arguments with commas. So let's say, oh, whoops, you hit F5. Okay, it only printed 1 through 9. And those aren't 10 values, those are 9 values. Because you have start from 1, you go to 9. So when we're making lists or doing ranges or things like that, the first index or the first value is considered the 0th value, right? All right, so because this topic of range indexing and indexing, we're going to talk about in the next module, but to help you understand, so let's talk about this code, right? So the list function, it creates a list. Now a list is a type of data structure that we'll also be talking about in the next module. So it creates a list. It's just a data structure, and we'll talk about it all in the next module. But it creates a list using an argument. And of course, the argument is this range function right here, all right? Now, we also can notate how, so remember indexing starts from 0, okay? So indexing is each, let me open this. So each of these values has an index. This is, so in indexing, we start from 0 and move up, all right? So the first item in this list is the 0th item. This is the first item. This is the second item. This is the third item. So this is part of the reason why there's only like 9 values in here. If we go from the range of 1 to 10, it counts the 0th item. Another part of this is that because it's accounting for the 0th item, you have to add 1 to the result value if you want to go to a certain number. So if, let's say, if we want to make a list from 1 to 15, we have to do 16 because it's accounting for a 0th item by default. So if we run this, it will make a list from 1 to 15. So if we remove this list function, right, what's going to happen when we print it? Right, so let's run this. It's just going to print range 1 through 16. There's not much you can do with that, right? It's not like a list of numbers. But what's good about this is that it's an object. So when we can use this numList object, we can iterate through it, right? We can loop through each of these numbers. We can loop through 1, 2, 3, all the way to 16, rather than having to do what we did in a while loop, where we had to add a value in order to create some sort of iteration, right? I'll show you guys how to use the interval real quick. And so let's make a list of even numbers. List of even numbers, all right? So we can create a list of even numbers. We'll call this even nums is equal to a list, right? And we're going to parse in the range function. And then we want this to go from 0 to 10. So we're going to use 11 and an interval of 2. So it's going to make a list using an interval 2. So every 2 numbers is going to be added to the list. So if we were to print this even nums list, if we were to run this, it would say, it would give us a list of even numbers from 0 all the way to 10. So in case if you need to get a list of even numbers, that's how you can do it. Now again, we're going to cover lists in the next module, but just to give you guys some context of what the range is doing, that's basically how we can use it, right? So let's save this and make a new file, and we'll call this for loop as an FOR. So for loop.py, and we'll delete all this. So for loop, it evaluates code for each item in a certain set of data, all right? So if we do for I in the range of 5, right? So this is a for loop. So this I variable right here that we're making is only accessible to the scope of this for loop. So everything from here and everything tabbed underneath it will be able to use this arbitrary value. So for I in range of 5, this I is going to be, okay, so for each item remember, for each item in that certain set of data. So this is our data, the range of 5. So I is going to be each item in that range of data. So for the first item in this data, we'll do this. And then for the second item in this data, we'll do this. For the third item in this set of data, we'll do this. So with that, we'll print hello. Hello world. So we can run this and it will print hello world 5 times because it will say for the first item in the range of 1 to 5, we'll print hello world. All right, now to the second item, we'll print hello world. Okay, for the third item, we'll print hello world. And until there's no more items in that set of data, we've iterated through all of them. Even do a print loop has ended, just to give you some context of, you know, how this exists and doesn't exist inside of the loop, right? You can print I can count to 5. And then it will say, so for I in the range of whatever, we can print I plus 1, because the first item is 0 and the last item would be 4, because we're accounting for the 0th item in this range, right? So if we run this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, loop has ended, right? Let's make a new file. So we'll save this, Control-Shift-S, and we'll say looping conditionals .py. All right, so we'll save this, we'll close this. So in Python, we can loop using the else. We can add conditionals to our loops, all right? So let's make a loop. So for I in the range of 5, we will print hello. Now, if I is equal to 7, we can break the program, right? Now, that doesn't make any sense because it won't come up to the range of, all right, let's make this 10, right? So if we make this code and run it, oh, whoops, I forgot to add the I here. So if I is equal to 7, it will print hello like whatever amount of times. Let's do, all right, just to clarify this, 1 do the range of 11, right? And when we run this, it will print hello 7 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right? So it prints hello 7 times. Now, it breaks because it didn't go to the full length of 10. Now, how can we have some sort of exception in place to see if the code ran successfully? Well, that's what we can use the else statement for. So in loops, the else statement will run if the loop runs successfully. So we can add an else statement to this loop. So we can say else print no errors occurred in our loop. There you go. So if we run this, this is not going to print because we had to break our code. But if we let's make this up to the range of 5, and we run this, then we'll say no errors occurred because we didn't have to break our code. So this is actually it for loops and iteration. We can actually get started and write or work on the practice. So for today's practice, we're going to be making multiplication table. So we're going to iterate from the range to 1 to 12, and for each number from the range of 1 to 12, we'll make a multiplication table using that number. Now, if you want to work on this project by yourself, you can go ahead and leave. And if you want to follow along for the practice, then you can stay with me and we can make this program. It should be pretty straightforward and pretty simple. But if you want some other ideas for types of projects you can make, you can probably make a like some sort of like the quiz that we made the previous module. You can have that same segment of code be ran multiple times and just change the values for each iteration, right? But let's not worry about that too much. So let's save this and make our new file. We'll call this multiplication tables.py, and we'll delete all this. So multiplication table generator, and then we can say created by Cosmo. You can put your name here if you want. All right, so we're going to make our variable for our range, and this will be our range limit, and this will equal the range of 1 to 13. So that way you guys can change the values if you want to. You can make it from 1 to 100, whatever you want. So you need to iterate through each table. All right. So for our table number in our range limit, so for our table number, so it's going to go from the range of 1 to 12, and then we'll have our banner here, and it will print an F string, and we can make a new line. We'll call this multiplication table for, and then we'll put in our table number. So now for each number, it's going to print multiplication table for the number 1, for the number 2, for the number 3, for the number 4, etc., 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 etc. So now we can have our code iterate through each multiple. All right, and now we'll do for multiple in our range limit. We can have our answer be equal to our table number and multiply it by our multiple. And then we can just print out the answer. So we can do an F string, and we can do, so our table number, and then we can hit X, and then so our table number, so let's say this is the range of 1, so 1 times our multiple, so 1 times 1, 1 times 2, 1 times 3, whatever, will equal our answer. And that's it. It should be pretty simple because it's loops, right? So basically this code will iterate for each table number between 1 and 12. And then it will say, this is the multiplication table for the number 1, for the number 2, number 3, whatever. So it will then iterate through this range again using the multiple. So we'll say 1 times 1 is whatever 1 times 1 is, which is 1. Then we'll say 1 times 2, 1 times 3, 1 times 4, and it'll give us the answers. So we can save this and run it. And there you go. It's generating multiplication table for 12. And I'll make this full screen so you can see it a little bit better. Multiplication table for number 3. So 3 times 1 is 3, 3 times 2 is 6, 3 times 3 is 9, 3 times 4 is 12. So we just generated multiplication tables. 2 times 1 is 2, 2 times 2 is 4, and 2 times 7 is 14. So we have all these multiplication tables that we generated using code that's only this big, right? And we only print out the title, the banner, and then the equation. You know what I mean? There's only 2 print statements in this code, and there's several print statements. I mean, there's several sets of output here. I hit something somewhere. Yeah, iterate through each multiple. So that's it. If you want to, you can try adding user input in here. I'll leave that up to you so you guys can get some more practice. Just ask them for a number, and it will output the multiplication table for that number. Or you can have them ask for the first 12 as well. So there you go. Hopefully that was a cool little practice we can do. Now we're going to move on to the next module, which is lists, I believe, data structures and lists. I'm gonna double check real quick so I'm not giving you guys like wrong information. Yeah, data structures and lists. So this is gonna kind of cover the list that you saw earlier. But yeah, so I'll see you guys over there. So make sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe, and do the whole YouTube algorithm thing. And I will see you there. Keep practicing, by the way. And if you guys are taking this course through my website, make sure to take the quiz and be able to test yourself a little bit and keep practicing and see where you guys go with it. So stay happy, stay positive, and as always, happy hacking.